The video you're about to watch is actually part of a bigger course which is called ClickUp Fundamentals Mastery, and if you want to get access, it's absolutely free. You can find the link in the description below. And by the way, if you need help with your ClickUp setup, you can also find the link to schedule a 30-minute discovery session in the comment section below this video. With that said, let's get to the class. And the first lesson that we're going to be covering is called ClickUp hierarchy. So let's jump into this. Now, in order to give you a better understanding and explanation of what ClickUp hierarchy is and what are all the components or pieces of how ClickUp is structured and how ClickUp functions, I prepared this little diagram over here. And I want to start with explaining that there are 5 levels of the ClickUp hierarchy. Many times you would hear people explaining them from the top down, right? Beginning at the very top, which is the workspace. I'm gonna explain what that is in a second, and going down and explaining like all the levels. I'm gonna start from the very bottom of the hierarchy and you'll see the reason why. The very first level that you have in ClickUp, which I call the first level of the hierarchy, is called the ClickUp task, which you can see over here. ClickUp task is basically one record, one item inside your ClickUp account. Now, that task is just called ClickUp task. It can actually represent anything you want. So it's not necessarily a to-do item, right? It doesn't necessarily represent the things that you have to do. It can represent anything you want. It can be an opportunity, it can be a lead, it can be anything. And in this example over here, let me show you the admin task, for example. So if you see over here, this is the admin list, and all these tasks over here represent the actual things that I need to complete. I need to check the compliance, review the hiring manager feedback, update the internal recruitment pipeline, all that stuff, the things I need to do. But on the other hand, the ClickUp task can represent things like job openings, which every single task will be, for example, this is HR generalist, a position that we're hiring for. This is customer success specialist that we're hiring for. So imagine ClickUp task being at the very bottom of the hierarchy and becoming basically those building blocks for your ClickUp setup. All right, going back to this image over here. Now, as you're having multiple tasks created in your ClickUp account, you might want to group them together by some sort of a meaning, right? Let's say I want my admin tasks to be in this list. I want my coworker or my team members' admin tasks to be in a different list, right? Because it makes sense. You want to group things by meaning, which can be, again, either by who it is assigned to, what team it refers to, or maybe, what type of task that really is. In my example, so essentially the second level, what I want to say, the second level of the hierarchy is list, which groups tasks together. It's some sort of like a small bucket where you put the same things. People say you don't put oranges and apples together. So you basically put oranges in one bucket, which means one type of tasks in one bucket, another type of tasks, which are apples, in a different bucket. So with this example that I shared with you over here, if you're tracking your job openings as a task, you might want to put them all together in a single list. And this is what you have, this yellow list over here. So all of the job openings are part of the same list. It makes sense, right? You don't want to spread them across multiple lists because that will become confusing. The same thing here, for example, applications. These are the applications that I'm getting from the applicants, right? So for example, Sarah applied to marketing coordinator position, and it makes total sense for me because I have all the applications here. It makes sense for me to store them in the same list. So again, this is the way you're breaking that down. You now basically know about the 2 levels, which is the first, the task, which becomes the building block, and then you're grouping those tasks into different lists in ClickUp. Now, as we go further and we go one step above that, we have our folders in ClickUp. Now, folders is basically work the same way as lists. I like to think about them as just bigger size buckets where you can put your list into, right? So you have tasks as oranges or apples, you put them inside little buckets, which are lists, and then you can put those little buckets into a little bit bigger buckets, which are folders. So again, works absolutely the same way. You're just basically grouping lists together to make it more organized and to make it more structured. So in this example, I have my job openings and my applications as 2 lists grouped under the hiring and onboarding folder. It makes sense to me because again, those refer to the same process. For example, my admin tasks are kind of outside of that process, I would say, or maybe outside of that department or that kind of part of the business. So I want to keep that separate. But over here, I can have those lists part of the same folder, and it keeps my ClickUp structure very, very organized. All right, so this is the 3rd level of the hierarchy. Again, tasks grouped into lists, grouped into folders. Moving on to the space level, which is going to be our 4th level of the hierarchy, which is the large bucket. Now over here, you're basically, as we're discussed, lists are small buckets, folders are medium-sized buckets, and now you're putting all those buckets into the largest buckets that you have, which is spaces. Again, the biggest bucket in your ClickUp workspace, right, in your ClickUp account, and allow you to structure things. You can break down things by department. You can break down things by the areas of responsibility. You can create personal spaces, right, and create folders and lists inside them. But again, this levels just essentially allow you to be flexible with how you structure your work in ClickUp. Again, how you organize your work in ClickUp. Important thing to mention here, you can see in the space, right? I have on the left-hand side the ClickUp Process First Training space. Inside that space, I have my folder, which is called Hiring and Onboarding. But what I also have is I have my list, which is not part of the folder, by the way. So important thing to keep in mind that lists can exist without folders inside spaces. Essentially, you can create multiple folders. You can have lists inside those folders, but you can also have lists outside of those folders. Hopefully that makes sense. And they will be just part of the same space. Again, ClickUp does this just to give you more flexibility on how you structure and organize things inside your ClickUp account. And now we're moving on to the very last level of the hierarchy, which is the workspace, right? This is the 5th level of the hierarchy. We started with the tasks. We went and we grouped those into different lists. Now we put those lists into folders, and we put those folders together with lists into big spaces. Now we have our overarching kind of bucket, which is called the ClickUp Workspace. This basically is the account, the ClickUp account that you have in place. This is where you're setting up your billing information, where you invite different users and all that kind of stuff. So again, Workspace is the largest bucket. I would say this is basically the whole account in ClickUp. And again, we're not really using Workspace level hierarchy when we're structuring or setting up things in ClickUp. We're just using spaces, folder, lists, and tasks. But it's important to know that ClickUp Workspace refers to the whole ClickUp account. All right, with that said, hopefully that explains to you all the levels of the hierarchy, gives you better understanding of what tasks are, how they grouped into lists and folders, spaces, and what the ClickUp Workspace is. With that said, we're going to jump to the next class.